I'll be interested to see after we kind of maybe go through this negotiation process or even into like the achievement throughout the year about whether or not we need to revert back or whether or not this is something to achieve. So looking forward to that feedback, and also feel free to just jump in anytime. I kind of see the KPIs as a means to an end rather than an end of themselves. Kind of create conversation on how we can improve each other, right? And these are, you might see some East Tennessee numbers, that we're in this together, right? And so if something is not hit, it could just as well be on the state side. And I will say, East Tennessee, your numbers are looking fantastic. Please keep that up. Cool. Thanks all this. Okay. Oh,
Can we have more money?
we will actually be talking about that. I'm gonna have to hit record here. Oh, did someone already hit record?
Yes, I got you.
Okay, thank you all. So what are KPIs? The kind of the purpose is to become the best public workforce system in the nation. And so how do you define it? So just as an introduction, we all have asked us to kind of do these kind of 5 core pillars of increasing access to education, training, and employment, particularly for those with significant barriers to employment, right? We also want to align our system. We want to improve the quality of labor market information. One piece of kind of new development is as the KPIs have moved into Wired, I think we are in a better position to provide you better qualitative data. So as we go through this, if you think like, if we have this particular data set, we could better inform our providers or participants if they had better information on X. Please let us know about that. Yesterday, Greater Memphis was talking about their incumbent worker program and how it'd be great to perhaps use the same methodology that we use to get the median earnings to report out those rather than kind of having to rely on people. So just those kinds of ideas keep them coming. We want to promote the improvement of structure and delivery of services, right? So we don't want to ask the same questions of the participant multiple times if we ever can. And then 5 is my favorite one, of securing living wages in order to meet the employer's demand, and also to make sure that we're not having to serve the same folks again and again. We can hopefully move them to a sustainable path. So we're all in this together. I've already touched on that. Talking about better performance. Victor, you're blinking, but I'm not sure. Okay. Better performance is kind of where we started in terms of trying to figure out how to achieve WIOA, but we kind of realized that we really kind of had this locked in, right? And so I would say we have some wiggle room that we can play in here to make sure that we're actually following on those kind of higher level goals. But just to kind of speak into this a little bit, again, I know some of you have seen this a few times now, but looking at these percentage-based measures that come from federal performance, if we had 2 LWDAs, one who served 160 participants and got 128 of those jobs, and another one who was served 15 participants but only 13 found jobs under better performance, which would be the higher level achieving of the deal.
B.
Right. So while that is the case, when we even asked this of the state board, they said they would like to see more A, right? Because 128 more jobs is going to grow the economy much more, and we're also going to help a lot more people, right? So what KPIs are trying to do at least their kind of initial few years that we had KPIs was trying to kind of address this kind of core gap. And so kind of what this looks like, here's an example of Wagner pilots before we had KPIs. And then after we have had this kind of big uptick. Thank you all East, you're a big part of that uptick in Wagner Pfizer. And then just a couple more the performance things is we want to make sure that we have measures that make sense, right? That we don't have to be overly convoluted and have 10 paragraphs about the underlying definition. And then finally, it's a kind of, this might say PY21 4 to 3, but what it actually means is kind of 5 overlapping cohorts, which makes analysis difficult, right? Because you might have a local board member who might wag your finger at missing one measure, but realizing that maybe that the discrepancy might have happened, 2.5 years ago, right? So we just want to keep that in mind when we talk about type performance. So what does this all mean? So our commissioner has said we have to ensure that we're measuring the right thing. And so hopefully KPIs are a way to speak to that. So we owe within the context of Tennessee has kind of led to this. So as I said, this is like the 5th time we've done this. So we've had some great constructive feedback. And I just wanted to highlight some of these. First, we've been asked to, wherever possible, focus on wheel-wide measures, right? Rather than program-specific goals. And really that translates to having less goals. Last year we had 23 KPIs, which is overwhelming. The second thing is we wanted to shift to outcome-based measures wherever possible, which means that we want to focus on how effective we are, right, rather than how busy we are. That being said, I think CSEP is a good example of this. Is we want to make sure that we're serving enough participants, because if we're only serving a couple, then we're kind of not fulfilling our mission. So kind of speaking to those 2 pieces of feedback, we are kind of in process of developing these macro KPIs that are outcome based. And so just to go through these rather quickly, is first it's Drive 55, right? Second is increasing labor force participation. And while we don't even have a pilot on this one, I just wanted to say yet again that hopefully if we have a labor force participation related measure, it's not labor force participation rate. As you all know, the percentage of labor force participation is in the hundreds of thousands, and we serve in the hundreds, if not thousands in some cases. So we just really want to make sure that all these goals are fair, sustainable, and attainable. And then lastly, this is the one where we actually have a pilot measure, is securing living wages. And so basically, there's 3 components of this. I know East Tennessee, you're well aware of this. You're actually one of the leading edges on this one. But there's 3 components. There's geography, household size, household makeup. For geography, this is kind of a quick analysis of, I just was trying to see patterns about where, while each county has its own living wage, I was trying to figure out which ones have the same. And so this is just a quick map of that. All the colors had the same living wage there. Ultimately, we would love to just draw from MIT from their wage tables. And then the second factor is household size, right? Based on how many people in your household, you might need to make different amounts of money. And then also the household makeup, right? So 2 adults, 1 child is probably going to have to make a different amount of money than say 1 adult with 2 kids, right? So the other thing that was brought up in our last call was TANF has a very similar measure, right, of wage attainment. It's right now is at $14.79 for TANF. Just to speak that I'm listing it as on hold, and just to be clear on that. So TANF has kind of flipped their service delivery structure. It used to be kind of Title I style of having providers do the bulk of it, and now they've kind of brought that into this. So, so TANF staff will be doing the service delivery, and then the other thing is that they are changing their case management system as well. And so, with those radical changes, they're going to hold off on presenting as KPI until they get their kind of house in order. But once they do, they're open to aligning with us. Once we kind of have figured out exactly how to square the kind of MIT model into the workforce system that we have in terms of what data we have available. So that being said, if you want to be part of this process of figuring out how best to make these decisions, please email me, and I'll be happy to include you in this conversation. So continuing on feedback, so we reduced the number of KPIs from last year of 23 to 13. And so there are some asterisks here. One is, like I said, the Family First is on hold, so those might come in should they be trading those things out. And then secondly, we've kind of already informally had these, but I'm calling these now funding dependent KPIs. And so basically, if you think about something like NDWG, if you all have a wildfire or, the tornado we just had, and we had a federal grant as a result of that, those federal grants usually have numbers within them in terms of strings attached. And so basically the KPI would just exactly correspond with what we were told the feds to do, perhaps breaking that down by quarter. So that's kind of what we would be looking like for NDWG, and a very similar thing with income worker and OJT. That's usually how the grants are distributed. I have a little bit more on that later, but basically Northern Middle had requested in their kind of email proposal that they lower the adult and dislocated worker KPI that we're initially giving them via guidance. And the way that they're going to do that is their local board had requested to use $300,000 to serve at least 150 incumbent worker participants. And so basically we let them lower their adult dislocated worker goal relative to that. So that being said, I just wanted to open it up to all LWDAs. And so that incumbent worker kind of model aligns with what's going on in your area. Please let me. Is your local board requesting / requiring that you use incumbent workers from Title I funds?
Yes, the board voted to allocate 10% of our formula funds. So we got, I want to say $200,000 that they authorized. And it was to go towards, yes, incumbent worker. We backed off some of that when the state actually made CBG funds available, but we still ended up spending over $100,000 in programming for incumbent workers.
And how is planning on addressing this? And again, open to feedback is like the initial draft of this, it should the state, kind of like you're saying with CBG, give out funds, then that's when we would decide what the KPI would be based on those funding levels. That being said, if we give you enough money for say 100 participants, if you all use Title I funds, that would still count towards that KPI, if that makes sense. Because all I will be looking at is from the participant side, how many number of workers did you have? And that can even provide like line items about this one's from this funding stream, this one's from that funding stream. But from a KPI side, we really don't care where the money comes from as long as we serve income. So on the either the $200,000 or the $100,000, if that's continuing this year, if you would like, and again, this is like an optional thing, we can note that and report on that to the state board on a quarterly basis. Just so you know, with Northern Middle, we're doing just 150 as an annual goal with like no quarterly breakouts, but just saying after quarter one, what percentage are you towards this?
We won't approach the board again for more program dollars to be used for IWT. It might occur in September, so we're really talking about, the program year that just ended with June 30th. So we haven't done that this current program year, 23-24.
Right, and we're doing the same thing at the state level. So we'll still be talking about June, this upcoming state board meeting, but just if that were to occur, and again, this is if you find it helpful, like when talking with Greater Memphis yesterday, I'm sure you might have local specific measures that you're reporting up to the board. I think they had an entire report that they're putting together, and so I'm okay presenting like highlights, or if you want to just like if you have a packet that you're putting together, I'm happy to provide that as a supplement because I think it's helpful to provide further context, right, about kind of where your priorities are.
Yeah, we generally report to the board how much money was spent in our at-risk and distressed counties. We report the overall number of incumbent workers that are trained and the dollar amount.
Right. Cool. And if that's something that you want us to include when I do my kind of KPI reports to the state board, just please email those to us and we'll be happy to pass these along.
Fantastic. Thank you.
This is kind of still responding to feedback. Is again, we want outcome-based measures, and that living wage is the first one of those kind of wide ones that we're working on. Another thing that is repeatedly raised is, hey, our funding levels are going down across the board, right? And so please pursue opportunities for additional funding. I think you all have seen that with CSA, or the Summer Youth Work Experience. I'm getting that acronym all jumbled up, but we pursued some state funding there. Hopefully that will be beneficial. Another, and I know this is brought up 1,000 times, so excuse me for bringing it up, but I think that Northern Middle's Fort Campbell was a great example of this, where basically Marla and her team kind of basically put together a whole proposal, and then we, the state, were able to kind of put our letterhead on it, which gave them lots of additional funding to serve people under WIO, right? So if you all see grant opportunities that you want to apply for, we're definitely open to that. Next up was, hey, this is August, and these were July targets, right? So we, the state, are late on this. We apologize. One thing that I think will hopefully be helpful is this year I issued out 2 years of guidance, if you all noticed that. So, and while I was sent out the PY23 targets, I also went ahead and I sent out forecasted target. And so basically, of course, those might change with 12 more months of hindsight. But basically, I just wanted to give you all a heads up about basically when I asked the subject matter experts this year, I said, hey, if you're able to achieve this target, what do you anticipate the next year's target? So hopefully if we have gaps in KPI kind of policy or target dissemination, you can kind of use those forecasted targets as a fallback. Because we know that it would be great if you all have the targets not only before July 1st, but also as you all are writing your contracts for that company. So moving into your feedback, we've had some great feedback. Thank you all through the kind of email process. First, I wanted to highlight a repeated sentiment. I think Southeast might have said it best, increasing enrollment targets while decreasing funding year over year compromises service delivery quality. And I definitely will go into that more detail in a second. And then the comfort worker we just talked about. And then third, making sure that everyone has the right contact information. So kind of where are we in this process? We're right here. We're negotiating the targets. It says before July 1st. Again, we need to improve on that. Probably we need to move this whole process up a couple months. So we've determined how big the pie is. And right now we're kind of figuring out how to slice it. And as you all know, you agree to all the goals that we presented. So this is really just kind of a conversation. And so I also wanted to point out that your performance levels, my gifts are not working, which is sad. But you all are rocking PY22 performance. And I just wanted to give you all a shout out off the top. Back to that kind of southeast comment about, hey, additional enrollment without just with less funds might diminish service quality. So this is an example I think that might be helpful to go through with Fair Memphis that we had a discussion on. And so if you focus in here for the adult dislocated worker and comfort workers, and this is primarily adults, they dropped each quarter from 652 all the way down to 105. And so basically this is kind of telling two stories at the same time. We had 146% achievement of the annual goal and only 36% of the targeted quarterly goal here. And just to be clear, the KPI policy states that the annual goal trumps any kind of quarterly achievement in terms of like you can make up for lost time in any one quarter, but we just wanted to check in with them because we didn't want this trend to kind of continue, right? So this is what Title I adult looks like overall with this black line. And then the colored lines are kind of by Grand region. So if you notice in Grand West Tennessee, we had a big spike and then a big drop. So when we kind of zoomed in a little bit, this is West Tennessee now as the top line, and then the different LWAs within West Tennessee, you can see that this primarily Greater Memphis has both the spike and the dip. And so this is just the same thing. And so the feedback we got back from Greater Memphis when we reached out was, hey, our service provider is unable to provide ITAs or supportive services, right? So we're out of money, right? It's kind of the big feedback. So the way that we're viewing this is actually a learning opportunity for the state. And there's kind of two pieces to this. The first that I want to throw out there is that the adult and dislocated worker should work with our strategic business solutions, right, the TA Tuesdays, to perhaps draft more technical assistance as it relates to kind of differentiating between the different types of enrollments. Because we've talked about this kind of indirectly, right? About, hey, you don't need to spend direct participant costs on every single participant. You can still trigger participation, still provide them with meaningful services that are kind of like already paid for, right? Things like one-on-ones, things like helping participants figure out how to apply for a job with the criminal record, right? So there's things that we can help. And so it'd be nice to kind of formalize this. I think perhaps acronyms stick. So I'm just throwing out there SBPs or service-based participants. And so hopefully this will kind of, in times in which funding is tight, which increasingly it is, right? The funding for all programs is going down, that this would perhaps unlock more flexibility at the local level while aligning with the desired levels of participants.
Hey, Ben, I understand what you've said there about the service-based participants and trying to incorporate ways to assist an individual without spending money.
Right.
But if we move in that direction, my concern is that because so many of those metrics are tied to the activities where we do spend money.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the training activity where we get the credential attainment and where we have the MSG. If we're not spending money on those activities, then those metrics, I'm afraid, will be impacted in a way that we don't want.
Are you referring to things like MPCR?
No. Okay. So in order to get the credential attainment, or in order to get the MSG, we have to enroll them in an activity where that would come into play. And generally, those are going to be where we've spent money on them.
Right.
Or one of the partners is going to spend money on them.
Right. And so hopefully we can have like a longer conversation with the subject matter experts leading that about, you know, I would say, and this is me speaking, like as an individual, I think we do have some room with our better performance in terms of the high degree that we are flying and passing all those colors against these things that we want to do, like serve a bunch of folks, right? So I think that there is some conflict there. I'm with you there and trying to figure out exactly how do we thread that. I will say, as it relates to that kind of number one push for KPIs, not for KPIs, for the WIOA, of making sure that we serve the hardest to serve. If anything, the credential attainment could actually increase in terms of if we were spending the same amount of direct participant costs, but spreading them out over less participants, right? So if you were having like SBPs and whatever the counter to that group is, then perhaps we can spend more money on any one individual, which might unlock, you know, training opportunities that we might have already kind of boxed ourselves out of with local policy about how many dollars we want to spend on any individual, and kind of open it up to being able to serve people that we might not have traditionally been able to actually get across that threshold. So it's a very nuanced and probably years-long conversation, but I just wanted to point that out as something that we've learned through this process. And then the second piece of that is from the money side, right? So how can we work with grants and budgets to proactively determine whether or not funds can be redirected to LWDAs? And so basically, why would we want to do this? And this is a greater Memphis example. In that fourth quarter alone, if we were to bump that up to their average, that would be 314 more participants. What does that mean relative to the state? That it's 5%, more than 5% of our state goal, which is greater than our entire continuous improvement goal for this year, right? So if this is just talking about, if I were to sum this up, we want to make sure, and I think that KPIs are well positioned to help our highest performing areas. I think East Tennessee is one of those. And so just so you know, conversations are being had about how best we do that, right? So earlier you're talking about more money. And so hopefully KPIs are not going to be the whole piece, right? Because there's other segments of performance, right? There's Justin's corrective action plans. There's Brian's and his team's fiscal reporting elements as well. And so really trying to figure out how do we provide this in a objective way. This is kind of another thing. So we just talked about the public worker, but this is just kind of why we didn't have it at the state line level because it's very hard to predict, because it's so funding dependent. On to apprenticeships. They're looking at peak enrollment here. They are also looking at increasing the number of state certified pre-apprenticeship programs. This is again, it's kind of more like be aware that the school exists, so that if you are working with employers who seemingly would fit for a great apprenticeship program model, please reach out to Eric to make sure that we can work in development. For JVSG, I thought this one was interesting. Do we have JVSG folks online? It doesn't look like it. But basically with JVSG, for years and years now, they've had the problem of very high staff turnover, right? Because a lot of the participants that they're working with, they can actually find them jobs that make more than even the JVSG staff is making, right? Which causes extreme turnover. So I'm really proud of Jeff Dent and his team. We're able to kind of consolidate some positions and increase the salaries of staff. So hopefully what that will show is higher staff retention and greater experience. And just looking at the numbers, that seems to have already occurred here. So just zooming in on East Tennessee, which is this purple line, we had a big increase recently. This is Grand East as a whole. And then this is LWDB East. We went from 8 new JVSG participants to 37. I imagine this is the staffing surge. Is that correct? It is great. With justice involved. So like any other comments on JVSG or adult dislocated worker? I know we kind of flew through things. Brian, I noticed you're on the call. Did you have any finer points as it relates to these kind of, hey, if we have additional funds, it'd be great to give them to the higher performing areas?
No, I don't have any additional comments. Funding is limited at the state, so everything is still subject to funds availability.
So I see your comment, Victor, about the video freezing. Hopefully when that's happened to me in the past, that the recording is still solid too. So hopefully that will be helpful. I know that there's a lot going on in these things. So we just talked about apprenticeships and JVSG. So for justice involved, we're also doing very well there. And to be clear, another area was concerned about their goal initially, and we are continuing to include all programs under this measure, right? So AE still counts towards this goal. Even VR, we were able to pull in their numbers as well. Do we have anybody from reentry? There's no, I know they're from the, sorry, go ahead, Victor.
How is VR reporting their justice involved numbers to you?
Just kind of via email, right? Because they have an entirely different system.
Right.
And it's only right now at the state level.
Okay.
But the amount is like 50 a quarter. That helps for the context.
Okay.
And I think
we want to get credit for everybody that we're serving, but I was just curious.
Oh, no, yeah, for sure. I would imagine that VR serves many more than 50. And I think it's just one of those things where, this is true across the board, and this is why you've seen this huge spike. I think ECNC is actually one of the LWDs that I think their service delivery model, your service delivery model rather, has been actually improving significantly over time. But as the whole, I think this is mainly a data reporting thing and trying to get a true count of whom we're already serving. And just a shout out to the Justice Involved team is to finally allow participants to self-identify as Justice Involved. So, I know that there's been some signs put up in pumps and just make sure that your staff is aware that that's kind of where we get the numbers, right? So this is kind of looking at potential to serve from the AE side. And again, this is just their map of their new service provider model. And so I will be providing that when I send it off to slides. Moving on to RISA. With RISA, just the highlight here is we are finally aligning with this guidance that we issued out. I think back when you were probably working RISA, Justin, we wanted to have half of those who show up for orientation be referred, and then 25% of those who refer to be enrolled, whereas I'd like to just say 12.5% of folks who show up to orientations need to be co-enrolled. And so basically, when we reviewed RISA numbers with the subject matter experts, we saw that we were within spitting distance of this guidance. And so that's kind of where this guidance stems from for RISA. So we're super excited about that. The other point that I want to make sure that everybody's aware of as it relates to RISA is the feds have required us to do kind of a controlled experiment to try to demonstrate the effectiveness of enrolling RISA at all. And so basically what they're going to do is they're going to take some portion of folks who wouldn't have qualified for RISA, and they're just not going to send them to orientation or really kind of anything, and then track those would-be participants' outcomes against participants that we do put in orientation, that we do provide services to, and try to just figure out, is there a spread between the two, and if so, how effective is the research program? So how does that affect this? Is you will have less opportunities to co-enroll folks under the research program. I'm not exactly sure the dates on that experiment, but that is just something to be aware of.
So they're going to show up in the pool for RISA, but not get scheduled for orientation.
That's my understanding. Yes, and it is very like, I had a 10-minute conversation with Gail about it. So please reach out to her for more detailed information on exactly how that occurs. But I think from your end, I believe it'll be business as normal. We'll just see less folks than if we were to have not had that. Good.
Because already the numbers are less than in years past.
Right, and that's why the guidance is kind of percentage based, and that's the kind of the vision on this is it's hard to predict before the year even occurs how many people will be eligible for RISA, right? And so that's kind of where the goals came from. In terms of looking at historical, what do we anticipate, how many people would be eligible for orientations and orientations, and of those, how many should be eligible. So in a world where the eligible pool changes radically, that would just make perfect sense to report out like perhaps a wide goal wasn't hit, right? And I talked about there are local factors in terms of service delivery that might affect numbers, or state kind of reported things, and there's also external factors. I think that RISA is perhaps one of the most susceptible to things like the unemployment rate, right? The inverse could also occur, right? There are all kinds of economists that saying that the economy is going to tank again. And so if that were to occur, we'd have, tenfold the amount of opportunities that we had last year. So hopefully that does not occur. Risa is a wild. For CSEP, we already did meet with the CSEP providers. And so basically just a couple of slides that we went over with them. If you notice, this black line is the number of vacancies that we have, which has been kind of growing, that we're concerned about. And that is because the number of exits have kind of typically been exceeding how many new enrollments we had. And so again, back to the narrowing or focused, we shifted from 2 measures for CSAP, one of which was something that we do still want to track as the ultimate goal of moving people to unsubsidized employment. But we thought for this year, it made sense to narrow our focus to new enrollment. So just so you all know, and I need to update this, apologies, I just now realized I didn't update it for this presentation, but for ETSU, they will be asked to serve 1/3 of their number of slots available for new enrollments. And that's something that hopefully we can achieve by working together and giving each other great referrals for. That being said, some of the issues that CSEP brought up was connection to the business services team, auditing host agencies to not kind of, I would say, abuse the system, honestly, in terms of if an employer has no intention of hiring a CSEP participant, then perhaps we need to pursue other host agencies. And then the final factor was talking about kind of compensation, right? So Nestor, I believe you're on the call. Do you want to speak to whether or not it makes sense to have CSEP participants earn $15 an hour rather than minimum wage?
I don't think he's on the call, Ben.
Okay. He was on the call earlier under Troy. If you are speaking, you're muted. But just to speak to that, we realized that some of this enrollments for CSEP has been hard because it's a pretty big difference between 725 and 15 or 21, right? And so while we do have this as a KPI, we want to make sure that the needs of the participant outrank that in terms of if a participant had the opportunity to make higher amounts, then they should be directed in that way. And my understanding from the previous call is Lance and Nestor are working with their FPO to figure out, is there a way that we can extend how many hours a CSEP participant might be able to receive? We're able to change the percentage or change the max. We're trying to figure out this equation out, and hopefully by focusing on this, even if we don't hit it, that can provide fuel to the fire about some needed policy change. That's my summary there. The other thing is people are asking for CSEP contacts, and so this is one for ETSU, and the full contact list will be. For SNAP ENT, this is one measure where I thought that it perhaps was clear about the impact of KPIs. So basically, KPIs came on board right here, and then we dropped them for SNAP ENT, and so you can see a big increase, then a dip after we took them off of the KPI. And that makes sense, right? Like when we took off these SNAP new enrollments, SNAP ENT new enrollments, we said that was no longer the push. And the reason that we said that to review was at one point in time, we said that, hey, if we increase the number of SNAP ENT new enrollments, DHS might be able to give us more money. That was determined not to be true. But good news, there's new leadership around. And so we do think that again might be a great opportunity. So that is why we are focused on SNAP ENT new enrollments this year. Any other comments about Snappy and Tea? I think this is one of our most popular programs. Moving on to trade. Notice that the goal is 90%, not 100%. And just a shout out here is we're actually going to be pulled in to present at upcoming NASWA training about how well you all are doing as it relates to trade co-enrollment. And while we're not aligning with that better performance level, we are actually doing much better than surrounding states. So this is one where continue to work with Myra and her team on. And please let us know situations where I think we've talked in previous years about situations where, again, it would make sense going all folks, but just keep us in the loop on there. I think they've done a very, has having the individual list of folks been helpful to you all about like, this is who we have as not co-enrolled. Have you found that to be beneficial?
Hey, Ben, it's Jennifer. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So we've turned in a couple things to Myra, just
Mhm.
reviewed, and nothing has really been removed from the denominator in the past. And like we had one lady that moved to another state and she'd been there like for 3 years and she was still on the denominator. So is there I know you were talking about having a form stack at some point, and then you said to kind of email her.
Right.
What's the best way to kind of get that information communicated and so that we can
So-
actually address that?
Yeah, so we're email is the way we've been doing it, and just kind of honestly, it's been rather than me try to play middleman,
Yeah.
I've kind of reached out to Myra each quarter to say like, hey, can you give me the list of people that are limited from either the numerator or denominator? And that's what I put in that sheet. If what you're speaking to in terms of staff possibly misinterpreting what you're sending them, I don't know if that's the way to describe it, or if there needs to be kind of a higher level kind of audit. I'm
Here's
not-
how it is.
Yeah.
I run the KPIs, then I look at who, and I go back and read the case notes myself and see who is what, and I send it to Victor half the time. Victor can attest to that. And then I'll send it to her. I haven't done this in a few, like a couple, 3 months, but I'll send it to Myra and just didn't really hear back on anything. So I don't know if
Okay.
that just got lost in the load of emails or what, but just want a effective way to actually communicate what we'd like to see based on us looking thoroughly through each case and each case note. And, we send it every time. I'll send it to the Title I folks. Hey, reach back out to this
Mhm.
person, check and see if they want to enroll now. Answer is no. I've already got a job, whatever. So,
Right.
it's kind of like beating a dead horse at that point. There's no point in that. So,
Right, and maybe to perhaps expand the circle. I know it looks like Justin was initially on this call and it looked like he dropped off.
Okay.
But if you want to include Justin Atkinson in
Yeah.
that email, I know there are repeated calls from local areas and also honestly stateside leadership to have more discussions as it relates to KPIs. I think it's kind of easy to default to, like you said, the numbers are the numbers, and that's kind of where we're at. So one of the things that Justin is trying to do with his team is have quarterly conversations at the regional level.
Okay.
And KPIs is being part of that conversation. And I know, Brian, you do a great job about having similar fiscal calls. So that being said, Justin might be a good person to include in the loop on this. And it could just be, we need to have better communication, or it could be the subject matter experts truly believe that this case should not be excluded. If so, you can have a more direct response about that. So
Okay.
thank you for that feedback. We just definitely want to make sure that we are communicating to every way.
Sure. Thank you.
And then with Wagner Heiser,
I'm just gonna
Alright.
chime in and back
Yeah.
up what Jennifer said, because
Mhm.
more often than not, she and I are having discussions about this very thing. I
Mhm.
think, Jennifer, the last time we sent something to Mara was in April,
Mhm.
after we looked at the numbers and the people and discovered that those that we had hoped to have removed had not been, so.
Right. And,
But we
I
never
would-
heard, we never heard anything back.
right,
Like,
and just
no
as it relates to,
comment.
just as it relates to KPIs
Yeah.
specifically,
Yes.
we have not. I have included the most recent, like through June in some of these graphs, but we
Yeah.
haven't actually submit like the rubber stamped one yet. And honestly, we're still running a lot of these numbers. But this is a great opportunity to kind of um,
Revisit.
revisit this.
Thank you.
Yes, and so if that is revisited, then I would say it's not going to affect in quarter 4, but it might, to your point, also affect quarter 3, quarter 2, quarter 1. Right?
Okay.
And so KPIs being state metrics are flexible in that, in terms of we can provide those corrections, unlike federal performance. Kind of once we hit submit, like that's it, right? It's locked in stone. So
Okay.
I definitely want to make sure that whatever we're providing the state board is accurate to our best understanding, even if the understanding changes. So,
Okay.
so
Thank you.
hopefully that is supportive.
Okay. Thank you.
On Wagner Pfizer, this is kind of a statewide. We have been turning down like we've shown for years, and we've actually been increasing. This is LWDA East specifically. Do you all have any best practices that you would like to share on Wagner Pfizer? It was just kind of as simple as making sure everybody who walks through the door is enrolled, or
Making sure everybody who walks through the door is communicated with from Wagner
Mhm.
Pizer, and making sure they're completing the common intake form, which we're using as the initial intake assessment. And then especially if they're justice involved, because we are gonna do some staff services with them, making sure those individuals are enrolled. And of course, we've got our multi-employer job fairs. We've got our one-stop reentry shops that we've got in 3 of our comprehensives, Knoxville, Sevierville, and Morristown, making sure those individuals are connected with Wagner Pizer. And we're doing a lot of outreach. We've got folks who are going from Title III to Steph's House, which is like a halfway house, mostly for homeless individuals, most of whom are veterans. We've got outreach to jails. We've got outreach to probation and parole.
Mhm.
We've got a lot of SNAP folks going out doing outreach, and folks are getting enrolled with SNAP, but also co-enrolled with Wagner Pizer, just regular, and lots of co-enrollments with Title I, and especially our RISA. They're doing a great job with that. I know that our Title I folks who are in our outlying counties under ETSU, they have done a bang-up job making sure that they are co-enrolling those individuals who come in the door for RISA. So I think everybody's running on all cylinders, making sure they're trying to get things done. So um, that's pretty much what we're doing, just hitting it heavy.
yeah, I appreciate that. I think what would cause this change is a culture, this shift, and it sounds like you've done it in LWDs, so appreciate that. I noticed, Ryan, you're back on this. There was another question that came up earlier. Maybe, I don't want to put you on the spot, but hopefully this might be helpful to East as well. Is Greater Memphis was asking, as it relates to their incumbent workers, um, if they were to perhaps like co-enroll folks in the incumbent worker. First of all, does that make sense? And then 2, if they do that, could we then perhaps pull the UI wage record table for the incumbent workers to get the information that way, rather than having to do the whole, please, employer, give us this information that you can respond to?
Yeah, the question to me doesn't really make sense, because incumbent worker is someone that's already, working at the employer, and we know that WIOA funding, dislocated worker has to be someone that's laid off. So it's not that. You're talking about it co-enrolling an adult. And the adult funding, is not enough to serve all people that need help with WIA services. So I would think that's why they had the priority population priority on top of that. So I'm not sure I have a clear understanding of the question, but if the question is, can we or should we be co-enrolling incumbent worker with adult?
With
I
Wagner
think
Pfizer.
no. Huh?
With Wagner Pfizer.
Oh, with Wagner Pfizer?
Mhm.
I mean, they're basically just to get registered, you become a Wagner Pfizer reportable only. They could come in and get basic services that would then enter them in Wagner Pfizer. So I don't really see any problem with that. You're going to it's going to kind of artificially inflate your earnings and any kind of entered employment rates because these people are 100%, working their own the job as definition by incumbent worker. So I wouldn't try to, I don't know that I would try to encourage a program where you are basically just doing that to help your performance. I would.
The question was coming from, because normally when people ask for additional data, right? They're like, oh, if you co-enroll them in this other program, we can pull that because they'll be in the system. And so the question was, could we get incumbent worker wages just like we pull median earnings if incumbent workers were co-enrolled with, say, 95? Does that make sense? Maybe that needs to be a different conversation.
Yeah. I don't, the question again doesn't make sense. I mean, incumbent worker, the wage records are going to come in just the same as every other person. So it's not like the way we get, as long as they're employers in the state of Tennessee paying, SUTA taxes or whatever, that's the way that we're going to get the wage records and find that out. It's not through follow up. Maybe the misunderstanding is they're required to do follow up, and a lot of them are recording what they're earning in the follow up for incumbent worker. But the way that we're going to find out what those earnings are is through wage records. Secondary place we would look as follow up. So maybe that helps answer the question there.
I guess sorry for everybody going so deep on this, but it sounds like we're already doing that then. Like we're already getting for the employer, they have a worker wages.
That's right.
Okay,
That's
and
right.
they just need to supplement. Okay, so
yep,
we're trying to address something that's already been solved. So thank you for that. So for youth, and this is just this is kind of my cheat sheet as it relates to the numbers that you all submitted. I know there's a lot of colors going on here, but green is like absolutely good to go. Yellow is just like, hey, I had to make some kind of decisions here. For example, you all agreed to Virginia's G51 and said divide that flat. You obviously can't directly divide that by 4. And so if you all just want to take a cursory glance at this to make sure that the quarterly breakouts are fine, like 12, 13, 13, 13. And then the ones that I actually wanted to discuss with you all is these kind of red breakouts. And the reason that I wanted to bring this up is for youth specifically. You all asked for flat numbers, while historically youth in particular was the most seasonal. And so this is looking at a 1-year average of the last year. You can see these quarterly breakouts of the total, and then the 3-year breakout, and then the 5-year average. And so basically what that would look like, I'm calling this the Troy rec, right? Because we just were able to discuss this. Would you all want something more like 109, 62, 80, 112, or do you just want to make sure that, or just would you prefer to just go flat? The reasons that we would want to perhaps consider seasonalities, because what we don't want to happen is that we hugely exceed one quarter and then perhaps be lower than you expected on another quarter, and that just kind of throws everybody off, right? So we want to make sure that we know what your actual expectations are, and so we can provide that to you in a collaborative form.
If we do a flat enrollment, then there's less likelihood that it will be reported that we failed to meet one of those higher goals.
That is true if your enrollment is flat, but the problem is, like, for example, like quarter two, which would be what? That'd be October through December. Historically, you all have been serving like 25% would be flat, right? So you've been serving in quarter two in particular far less. And so if you all had a flat goal, you're going to show that you didn't hit your goal, even though you might say, no, we actually are performing at expectations. And I would just say, hopefully when we set our goals, that's where we set the expectations, not when we're looking at the achievement. But this is up to you. This is not like you have to. This is something that I pointed out to other areas and like, oh yeah, this makes sense. But it doesn't have to be.
Let me ask a clarifying question,
Yeah.
Ben. You did say that it's really the annual goal that's the most important, and quarterly is just for tracking purposes, right?
Right, but the way
Okay.
we're more insured to hit the annual goal when we hit our quarterly goals, right? So like,
Yeah.
If you're something's crazy, we can know what's going on, and so it'd be like, oh, how can we help, right? So that's kind of the purpose of the quarter.
I do track for our partners. I do track where we are on the annual goal after each quarter, just so people have a clue. So, I mean, it's up to DTSU on that and to staff of the board, but whatever they want to do. But we're very OCD about our KPIs, Ben. Okay, in case you haven't noticed.
I can
Okay.
tell, right? You
Yeah.
are greatly exceeding, and I don't want to mess with the thing that's working out well, but I just wanted to point this out because
Yes.
youth were the most volatile, and I just wanted to be like, hey, because you were proposing flat across the board, this would be one that just would show up. And also, like, if you want to go just look at it after this call, I actually created a kind of template that you can use. I'll actually share this in the chat. Because I'm a visual person as it relates to this. So I'll copy the link and I'll just throw this in the chat. It should be open for anyone to edit it. If you would like, you can go up here and file, make a copy. And then you can have your own copy that other people won't mess with. But if you slide over to the right, I went ahead and I provided you what you all did last year, what you did as an average for 3 years, and what you did as a 5-year average. It's just things to consider. And these are just kind of different curves here. So like if you want to put, you need to do 20% in the first quarter, that would adjust it. So these are the kind of the percentages, and this is what the counts would be once you change this number. So this number changes up 400, all the numbers change. So hopefully I just put in the 362 that we're both in agreement to. But hopefully this will be helpful. Even perhaps providing advice to the different providers. Right? So perhaps I'll just throw this out there. You just perhaps want to email me if you want to revise this flat number. Does that make sense? Rather than do math live.
I think Victor will get with ETSU and they'll probably figure it out and let you know if they have a change. How about that?
Okay. And just put a date on it by the end of Friday. And then there is a link here, and I also put a link in the chat. So hopefully. Also, for youth enrollment, we want to make sure that we at least have 30% in school youth, right? To maintain the flexibility provided in that waiver. And so basically, we just kind of do that over for it. Any things on mainstream youth, Troy, that we want to talk about before we jump into youth work experience?
You're good to go.
So with youth work experience, and I think I've alluded to this in other programs, but this is still true for this one. Even though the targets were just summing what you all submitted for SYEP, if you use other funding streams to serve youth, to do your youth work experience, that will also count towards this goal. So that's one point. And then the second point is SYEP can actually be a great pipeline for run-of-the-mill youth, right? So if you co-enroll them from the KPI side, we want to encourage co-enrollment. That creates more opportunities in terms of increasing the menu of services for youth. And so basically you would get points for both sides. So where a youth work experience participant would be eligible to be enrolled with Title I youth, that would be total. Any comments on either side of the house on youth work experience? We're just about wrapping up. And again, this is just another thing that you all submit flat. Maybe that makes sense, maybe it doesn't. Just please get it back to us, whether or not you want to do any changes. I know it is a new program. So just some last final notes. These are the maps that are somewhat helpful, right? So this is the one that Madison puts together for our American Job Centers. This is the adult basic education map with the new providers along with their potential to serve, as well as the ILCE providers. I also gave you all the Distress County map, as well as the changes that occurred between this year and last year, as well as last year's map. And then CSEP's map based on how many slots they have. And then some people were requesting contacts. So this is a list of local contacts. Please let us know if there are any changes there. And state contacts, also have that out when I think on the official version of this slide. And then the CSEP contact. What is next? Just very quickly is, like I alluded to before, we need to get out that through June report. And so following the negotiations, that's what will be next on the docket. And there's the state board meeting coming up August 25th. And the last thing is that we are kind of working on this year, trying to put together that elusive dashboard, right? So hopefully we can provide you with just your counts rather than having to say, here's how you pull the numbers, right? So hopefully we can start tackling that this year as well. We have SNAP ET new enrollments already, and hopefully we can ship away.
Are you going to send out a link to all those documents that you just discussed, like the map and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so so I will be sending this out as a PDF to you
Oh,
all,
okay, cool.
and the links should be
Oh, okay.
like on the bottom. So
Okay, cool.
I know with Snap ENT in particular, I think they were working on. They have some PII information on it currently, and so they are very restrictive about who had access to that. But we have received the request to kind of get rid of that PII and have perhaps a separate, very similar dashboard with that stripping. Right? So,
Okay.
because I think this would be beneficial to everyone.
Thank you.
So I know someone just joined, but I think we're saying their goodbyes. Thank you all for joining us here today. Any closing thoughts from anybody other than how great East Tennessee is? All right, well, it's great chatting with you all, as always. Please continue to provide that great feedback. Again, if folks want to help us out with living wage numbers, please hit me up. And if not, I'll see you on the next call. Goodbye,
Take care.
everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.